After we've formed the ring, we're now going to start filing the joint so that we can prepare it for soldering. We put the flat file inside where the joint is, and we kind of position it a little bit so that when we push the file through, it's not going to hit the upper rim. This is the equaling function of a flat file because we are going to be making it so that both of those ends of the joint are going to be pressed together and both meet. So this is going to make sure that the joint is actually secure. You push the file through by putting it right on the end first and then just kind of positioning it, squeezing it together just very slightly, and then push the file straight through very slowly, very deliberately. Every 2 or 3 strokes, you're going to check to see what those ends look like. You have to be very careful not to move the file back and forth or wiggle the ring back and forth, because that's going to make it so that the ends don't fit together. The solder seam has to be perfect, and so you can split the ring apart just a little bit and you can see where the file is hitting each of those edges. You should see it should be very shiny. There will be file marks right along those lines. That's when you know that you're filing correctly. Now you just squeeze it together, and you might have to do this a few times. File, then squeeze together, and then you're going to position it up toward the light so that you can tell if you filed it evenly. If you can squeeze it together and there's a lot of light coming through that seam, then you have to go back and file a little bit. But if you've got it so that no light is coming through, the next is pressure fitting your ring so that it stays together. You have to push one end over the other. And it's a little tricky to do because you have to manipulate this ring, and it might hurt your thumbs a little because this is a lot of metal. So you have to kind of wiggle it together, and you have to make sure that when you look at it from one end and also across the top and then on the other side, you have to make sure that there's no unevenness in that seam. It has to be very, very tight, and it has to be exactly how you want to keep it for when it's soldered, because if you solder it together unevenly, then your ring is probably going to fall apart. So you have to make sure that this step is just right. Check with me because I can help you to get it right before you solder it. Now we're going to be putting flux right above and right below the seam. That's the only place we need to have it. And then you're going to pile bits of solder, maybe 4 or 5 pieces. You can use either the brush or you can use tweezers to place solder right along the seam. To solder it, we're going to be using cross-lock tweezers that are called third hands. They squeeze together like this, and we're going to clamp our ring at 12 o'clock and we're going to have the seam at 6. So this is going to make it so that the heat is going to be distributed evenly. We want to heat from below, so we're going to hang it over the table just like this. Now I'm going to light the torch. I don't want an oxidizing flame, so we don't want that. That's bad. So make sure you've got neutral flame. I'm sitting directly in front and I'm pointing the torch upward. So notice I'm hovering but from reverse, so I'm kind of backed off down a little bit, and I'm drying out the flux. And I'm watching to see that the solder pieces are where they're supposed to be. So I'm drying out the flux, and when I see it's past the crusty phase, then I bring it closer. And it literally takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to just get those solder pieces melted. If you hold it there any longer and you're using silver, you will melt your ring. So then you quench the tip of those third arm tweezers because they're going to be very, very hot, but then you dump that into the quench bowl. Put it in the pickle, let that sit, but then you're going to try it again. Put more solder on, and then you're going to melt a second puddle. You just want to make sure you take that torch away very quickly because, you know, silver and copper conduct heat very, very easily. Once you've soldered it a couple of times and you have a good puddle of solder there, you're going to pickle it and then you will shape it. You will round that ring on a ring mandrel. After that, you're going to start filing all of the solder off. You're going to try and make it so that that solder disappears, meaning it blends in with the silver. If you're using copper, then the solder is going to be visible. That's totally fine on the inside. So you're just going to be doing parallel strokes to the inside of the metal. Set it right on the table like this, make it sturdy, and then parallel file strokes inside with the half round. That's going to soften the edges of the solder seam that's on the inside. So let there be a good amount of solder on the inside. The outside seam is going to be filed differently. You're going to use the flat part of the file, just right over that part of the seam. You'll see a thin line if you've used copper, but if you use silver, it should disappear right into the ring and be smooth. You shouldn't see any kind of ridge or anything. The next step is then to level out the band. If the band is a little uneven, the ends aren't quite meeting, or it's just not level above and below where your seam is, then you can use the flat part of your file, either the flat side of the half round or a flat file, and just level them out. If you've got any ridges, any splits in the seam above and below on the top and the bottom of the seam, you can file those away. Now I'm going to be re-rounding the inside because it's a little sharp, so I'm taking the sharp edge away, and this is just right where the seam is, no place else. Make it blend in with the rest of the ring. The only place we need to be filing is just where that solder seam is, because we're just blending it in with the rest of the ring. But after you've done all of your filing on the inside, then you're going to start re-rounding the edge on the outside. File at an angle all the way around. Again, just make it blend in. Then you're going to go straight to emerying, specifically where you did a lot of filing. You're going to 150 every place where you filed in the direction of the ring, both inside and outside. Just follow the grain of the ring. And you're going to remove all those file marks, and you're trying to make it super smooth, all through 1200. If you're using copper, you're going to go all the way through steel wool, and then you can wash it and dry it, and you're done. But if you're using silver, it's going to start looking uneven. That's where this next step comes. We're going to be heating up the ring and bringing it to a powdery color. We're going to heat for 3 seconds or so, and then take the torch off. Heat it for another 3 seconds or so. Take the torch off. Going to let the color come up. You'll start to see it. 1, 2, 3, and then here you see fire scale. Every place where you filed or you emeried, you're going to see fire scale. And you're going to immediately take that mesh screen and dunk it in the pickle. There's going to be a pickle pot that's going to be right next to where you're going to be doing all of this. Quench it in the pickle, and that's going to remove all that fire scale. And you'll immediately just take it out with tongs, put it in water, and use a steel brush and give it a quick scrub all around. That will have removed all of the fire scale. As soon as you've scrubbed it just for, 30 seconds or so, give it a rinse, dry it really, really well, and now you're going to repeat this heat pickle scrub. You're going to notice that there is unevenness. So you see two different colors. You see like a dark gray kind of around the middle, and you see some white silver. We're going to try and make that even by doing this heat pickle scrub. So we heat for 3 seconds, off for 3 seconds. And usually, as soon as you see it turn golden or sort of a dark gray, that's just the fire scale coming up. Then we immediately quench it in the pickle. You're only going to see it fire scale any place where you filed. Quench it in the pickle, put it in the water real quick, give it a scrub, and you're going to do this a number of times, because every single time that you do this sequence, the color is going to start changing, and it's going to start getting whiter and more powdery looking, like it looks right now. And you'll notice that after a few times of doing this, you'll heat it for a few seconds, take the torch off for a few seconds, heat it for a few seconds, take the torch off for a few seconds. So it's basically on for 3, off for 3, on for 3, off for 3. You're not heating it up to any red hot or anything like that. You're just trying to see if fire scale comes up. That's just heating it and cooling it. And you're going to see when this is done, nothing happens except where your solder seam is. You'll see the solder seam turn this gray color, but everything else keeps that powdery white. That's when you know you're done. So you give it one last pickle and a rinse, but then don't scrub that last time. Just dry it off really well. And here I'll show you what this looks like. It's powdery white, it's kind of matte in appearance, and now you take a polishing cloth to it and you're going to make it super mirror shiny, and then you're done.